This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. I am Matteo Rizzi, the executive producer of the show number 194. And we are into the ecosystem zoom in, talking about the Danish case with my friend Thomas. Thomas, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
And we have I don't know if I want to reveal the happy news that I just heard, but we have the co-founder and CEO of Lunar. Ken, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you for having me, and hello to you as well, Thomas.
Okay, guys, let's super quick intro, like a couple of minutes. Maybe let's start with you, Ken. Happy father of a unicorn, and tell us a little bit your story in 2 minutes, please.
Sure. So I think in many ways, I see myself as a fintech veteran. So I founded a business back in 2012 that did point of sale. And a couple of years later, that business got acquired. And then alongside two of my really great friends, we founded Lunar in 2015, which at that point in time was just a small Danish fintech company. A couple of years later, we decided to apply for a banking license, which we achieved in 2019. That was the first independent banking license in more than 10 years in Denmark. Went live in 2020, and now we serve 750,000 customers across the Scandinavian region.
Cool. That's sounds one of the neobank story that ended up well. There are not many.
Hopefully we'll be one of those, of the great ones.
Yes. It looks like. Thomas, a couple of words about you, please.
Sure. Not quite as impressive as Ken's, but so I actually don't come from an entrepreneurial background, but from a long background of financial services. And then in 2016, we founded Copenhagen FinTech, which is a non-profit, an association, and with the aim of trying to grow and support the Danish and now also the very much the Nordic Fintech ecosystem. And we do that in several ways. We do it running different programs. We do it. We have 2 offices, both in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and the second largest city of Aarhus. And then we run different research projects, accelerator programs, incubation programs, and stuff like that. So we do a lot of different activities, but I think more importantly, we run a global network of both fintechs, financial institutions, investors, and then we try to gather them in Copenhagen every year. In September, it's coming up next week, where you will also be there, Matteo. A couple of thousand people out of Copenhagen, the biggest fintech conference, where we're trying to zoom in and bring the world to the Nordics. And on a side note here, we also facilitated a early stage venture fund last year called Opfin. So Opfin is investing in Nordic fintech companies primarily.
Yeah, I mean, I actually wanted to give you an assist anyway about the Nordics FinTech Week or festival gathering that indeed I will have the pleasure to participate. With a bunch of international speakers. Our friends of Nendo will be there from NIS/Elevandi, and I'm looking forward for. Actually, it's one of the largest, certainly in Europe. But also, what I wanted to say as well, and actually, for both of you to chip in, I'm making this consideration that, Nordics is a little bit of the cradle of innovation in general, of the tech innovation in Europe, right? Like back into the Nokia, like a brilliant days, right? Then, of course, that story we all knew, where it went. But do you think, and I was actually reading that, there is a diaspora of unicorns entrepreneurs that sort of went out from the stripes of this world, and they built themselves, a number of unicorns. I read something like 65,000 employees, generated from former alumni, right? So don't you think that Nokia's footsteps, 30 years ago, kind were the first way for the Nordics to start leaving a footprint into the tech universe that then of course morph into the fintech one. What do you guys think?
You want to go first, Ken?
Yeah, I don't know. You might be onto something. I'm not that familiar with former Nokia people expanding into business, but I think overall, you have a great argument that I think the Nordic region is a cradle in many ways. So whether that is from Nokia or from other type of businesses, I don't know. But I think what we're seeing right now is, I think we're seeing kind of the, coming to the third generation of really large Nordic companies. And we can see that from the first and second generation of businesses, that those guys are becoming investors and supporters and second-time founders. So it's definitely accelerating in the Nordics. And some of those might be from Nokia days or later on from Skype or from Spotify or from other type of businesses. So yeah, definitely a good point.
And I think if you look at, and I think that's an interesting fact, if you look at most international rankings of most innovative countries around the world, and actually also most digitized countries, you'll actually find the Nordic countries, pretty much all of them, in top 10. So there is something there, and I think that goes back to, I think there's several things, but it comes back to our way of thinking design. And that actually goes back all the way to, in the 60s, the Danish architects, the Nordic architects, furniture production and stuff like that, thinking around human-centered design. There's a lot of the cultural heritage when it comes to very flat hierarchies. So everyone is allowed to speak their mind. In every article you read around, what's the most important component of innovation, that is actually psychological safety and being able to speak your mind and so on and so forth, right? And you have that in the Nordics. And then I think you're right in the sense when you mentioned Nokia, the telco industry, and I think especially in Finland and in Sweden, that accelerated a lot of innovation in the Nordic region also. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of good stuff happening here where we traditionally have struggled a bit, is actually scaling those. But I think we're learning that also, how to scale companies. But that's more on the challenge side, right? There's a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of innovation happening, a lot of really cool companies, especially in the fintech space. And then we just need to grow them big.
Actually, I wanted to take the opportunity to have the two sides of the same story here in the conversation, and ask a question about what is really the value of having an ecosystem builder, like an association or any sort of catalyst, that puts together the regulator, the investors, the startups, the tech player, the incumbents. And make it really self-sustainable and not simply like a facade, a marketing facade, just to say, hey, we also have an association. And then sort of the same question for Ken, as an entrepreneur, what do you think is the value that this type of association, had, and you could enjoy or not? What were the challenges? What could have been done differently, and what should be done for having more Lunars in the ecosystem? Thomas, you first.
All right. I was actually inclined to say that should be Ken that answers that question first before I start speaking of the value of my own organization. But I think
you can talk about the challenges. So, for example, of making it self-sustainable, which is where a lot of association fails.
But I think if you look at the Nordics and especially Denmark, right, obvious things, small region and small countries, right? And none of our countries are actually, if you take the fintech space, are actually not financial centers. So I think, if you go to London, New York, Toronto, Singapore, you have these massive global banks represented, right? You have a lot of talent, financial talent, of course, a lot of tech talent, and so on and so forth. And the Nordic capitals, whether it's Stockholm or Copenhagen or Oslo or Helsinki and whatever, they're not known as financial centers. I think we're known as tech hubs and entrepreneurial hubs, and as we talked about before, there's a lot of innovation going on. But obviously, I think one of the advantages but also the challenges is that how do you create a fintech hub in a place where you don't have a financial center? And I think that's partly what we have been trying to do and saying, okay, we know we cannot because of the sheer size of the region and the countries, never be the biggest, but we can be the most connected. So we spend a lot of time since the beginning of Copenhagen FinTech to say we need to draw the world to the Nordics and tell the Nordic story. And we need to get all these tech companies, financial institutions from around the world to look at the Nordics and especially Copenhagen and see what's going on there. And I think to some extent, at least, we've succeeded in, when I go traveling now, whether it's Singapore or wherever it is, they know that, something is going on. They haven't always been there, but then we try to bring companies to them, and we see increasingly that Nordic fintech companies are scaling their products and services out of Europe, which was also very much a goal for us when we began in 2016.
I have a follow-up question on this, but before, Ken, please chip in.
Yeah, well, I think, having known Thomas for more than a few years, I know he's a humble guy. He's not going to give credit to himself, so I might as well do that. So I think there's, I think it's just amazing what Thomas and his colleagues have done for Copenhagen FinTech. As a founder operating your business, that's your whole life, right? You're spending all your waking hours on building your business. So obviously you want to expand your network, you want to meet other fintech peers, you want to talk to the incumbents. There's loads of things that you want to do, but you're just super focused on building your business. And I think for Thomas to kind of set sail for Copenhagen FinTech initially, at a point in time where fintech, maybe in Denmark or in the Nordics broadly, was not that known, and the persistency that him and his colleagues laid forward just pushing through has been second to none. So that has been tremendous for me as a founder and for Lunar's journey to, join in on events, being there in activities and conferences. We've had dinners in London, we've had field trips across the world. So there's so many things that Copenhagen FinTech have done. And, connecting that to persistency, when Thomas initially launched with his colleagues, there was a bunch of other similar type of organizations launching in the Nordics. Few of those have remained. So I think that also speaks about the persistency that Thomas and his colleagues had laid forward. And again, coming from a region here in the Nordics that is only 27 million, must be really, really difficult in contrast to the size of the world, right? But I think I remember I went to an event a couple of years ago with Obama here in the Nordics, and Obama, he said, "You guys in the Nordics, you're punching above your weight." And I think that's definitely what Thomas and his fintech colleagues have been doing.
It is actually very relevant to the way I wanted to build up the question and bouncing it back to both of you. I've been to Cyprus for the Cyprus FinTech Summit a couple of weeks ago. And of course, every relatively small ecosystem wants to find its own identity, right? And its own way to become unique or attract that specific sort of unique expertise in terms of talent or in terms of easy to regulate a specific business, etc., etc. And my question is, how much of the success in doing that is investment? How much is about pure? Because one could argue, yes, Denmark is small, but it's very rich. So that's why you guys managed to do this, right? Or, Luxembourg, even smaller, probably even richer, and also like the cradle of a very specific business within fintech. So it was easier to do it. And, Cyprus, they might do it in crypto maybe, but, they don't have the same chance. So how much is the credit is to the mentality, mindset of the government and the ecosystem in general, history, or simply like a pure hard work? Because maybe the same money that was invested in the fintech space in Denmark, Cyprus could put it, and I'm just really thinking out loud. And how much of it is simply doing this at the right time? Thomas.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think, to be honest, I think if you cut it to the core, I think two things drives an ecosystem, and it's access to risk capital, it's access to talent, right? And I think that has been our focus from the very beginning, and also why we in the end also decided to see what kind of role can we play in facilitating an early stage venture fund. But I think access to risk capital and access to talent. And if you look at the numbers, right now, Danish fintech founders, because not all of them are headquartered in Denmark, but in 2021, 9.5 billion Danish kroners was invested in fintech. 2022, I think it follows the same trajectory as many other countries, 3.1. Now we are in 2023, we are around 1.1 billion Danish kroners, right? So it's certainly gone down, but I think 80% of that money is actually. And I think Lunar is a great story of actually the opposite. But most of the investments also in Danish fintech is actually coming from outside of Denmark, especially when we take the later rounds. But I think here again, Ken has a great story of actually being able to scale on Danish money also. So and then there's the access to talent, right? And that's also what we're trying to do here in gathering this community, global community, to Copenhagen and the Nordics, and make them understand, the livability, how things work in the Nordics, and why it's a great place. It is actually a great place to build a company. And I think if we look at it, if you look at a country like Denmark, Lunar is the obvious example of a unicorn being built in Denmark. Pleo, most guys also know Pleo. I think they're in 15, 16.
One of the co-founders is Italian. That's why
That is right. That is right, Matteo. Yeah. I think it's the CTO, right? But the first one was actually Tradeshift, right? They're now headquartered in San Francisco, but Tradeshift is also with Danish founders, right? And then when we opened the lab, one of the first companies that moved in was Michael Grønager, that founded Chainalysis. Also a Dane, and you can continue. We have Banking Circle that grew out of Saxo Bank, Public.com. You have also with a Danish co-founder, and so on and so forth. So we have actually a tradition for building financial technology. SimCorp, they are building technology for the world's biggest asset managers and are now being acquired by Deutsche Börse. So there is actually kind of a legacy here. But I think you probably also have a little bit of and I think especially your story with attracting Danish capital is interesting in this context here.
Yeah, I think Matteo, to your question, I think I actually think that the majority of the path to success is hard work. To your own topic, right? It's easy to think about something, but it's not easy to attract capital to a 6 million strong country or 27 million strong region, right? That is super difficult. So I think even though we're kind of standing on the shoulders of some giants in the Nordic region, it hasn't been a walk in the park. And I think those companies that Thomas just mentioned are great examples of the new generation of businesses pushing forward.
So, guys, tell me a little bit about how are the more traditional players of the region reacting or like contributing, right, to the, because remember, I worked for you might not know it, but I worked for Swift for 13 years, and in the last 4 or 5, I was dealing with the innovation side, and I think that I saw the rise of the fintech space as well with InnoTribe. But just before, I was actually selling what used to be called Swift corporate solutions. When large corporations could have their own Swift machine, having a single window, access to all the banks, etc., etc. And of course, banks were at the forefront of this innovation. And I remember vividly, some of the conversations with some of the Nordea of the situation of the Danske Bank, and these banks being pretty the appetite of risk, paradoxically speaking, was actually pretty big. And I'm talking about the pre-fintech area. How is this appetite, or has this appetite evolved? When fintech sort of asked for a much faster acceleration in terms of innovation, flexibility, way to acquire customers, build products, where are the incumbents positioned right now? Maybe Ken, as these are your more traditional competitors, you have a privileged view, right?
Oh, look, it's a good question. Let me give it a hard thought, because I see myself as a rebellion fighting the dark side, and in many ways I see the Nordic incumbents as 6 Death Stars that we're trying to bring down. But jokes aside, I think the Nordic incumbents are doing a tremendous job, and I think they have actually historically been leaders in the globe on bringing new endeavors, showing new experiences, new product lines in many ways, and I think they continue to do so. However, I think if you kind of dissect the Nordic landscape, I think you have to look at the incumbents as a 3-layered cake. You have 3 layers in that cake, right?
At least it's a cake,
it's a cake. It's a cake, but it's not only sweets and sugar. So the top layer of that cake is their digital capabilities and their product innovation, and that is truly great, right? We have seen incumbent banks spearheading P2P initiatives, new ways of thinking mortgages over the last generation. So many systems and products is just super great in that first layer of the cake. So I think, if we took Nordic incumbents products to other territories in the world, it would definitely be crushing it. Those guys do amazing products. Then if you take the lower layer of the cake, that is the core infrastructure in the Nordic region. This is our clearing system. It's our payment rails. It's our account infrastructure. That is probably second to none, also on a global level. We have an amazing infrastructure in the Nordic region. We have instant payments, instant clearing setups. We have national identification protocols, so we can easily identify customers and businesses. We have just an amazing setup. The middle layer of that cake, and that's the bittersweet part, that is the incumbent's own infrastructure. And that is basically still a nightmare from years and years back. So I think that is also the opportunity for companies like us and like other fintechs in the Nordics, that you have a great infrastructure to tap into, and you have a high level of competition, because incumbents are doing a great job on the front end. But if you can beat all 3 layers in the cake, you can actually outcompete some of the world's leading banks that we're doing here in the Nordics.
Thomas.
Yeah, I think from another perspective, but because I totally agree with Ken on what he said here. I think when it comes to being, again, coming back to some of the most digital countries in the world, infrastructure is great. You can build great products and services on top of that. I would say where I'm worried is that the outlook of these incumbent financial institutions and understanding how the world is moving and how fast fintech is moving and technology is transforming this space, I think I'm a little bit worried that, again, coming back to when we look at what's going on in Singapore, India, and many other countries and regions around the world, we begin to see countries and regions leapfrogging, right, and catching up with the Nordics, and to some extent, I'm a little bit worried that because these are the incumbent players to some extent are fat cats, right? It's going really well. They are earning a lot of money, so why rock the boat? And I saw some interesting numbers today, and I won't reveal them because they're actually going to be presented at the Nordic Fintech Week, and it's not going to be by me. So I just had a glance at them, and I just saw some numbers around the average number of fintech partnerships for Nordic financial institutions compared with financial institutions outside of the Nordics. And that number was actually surprising to me because it was way lower than expected and way lower than the average financial institutions outside of the Nordics, which shows a little bit like, is there this sense of urgency to transform? Is there like a real incentive to actually do those, which I think in a few years going to be crucial for them?
Is it possible that they just gave up, Thomas? They gave up because there are too many Lunars that are powerful and big and on a super fast growth.
I don't think they gave up. On the contrary, actually, I think it's maybe on short term going a little bit too well without having to rock the boat a lot. Ken's been doing an amazing job here and obviously some really impressive growth here. But still, the sense of urgency to really do something different. The question mark is that there, and are they willing to really push it? Because I think they will need to in just a matter of 3 to 5 years, right? And that makes me a little bit worried, and that's where we are pushing also constantly for the industry to engage with this ecosystem. But because the fintech companies, they're gonna seek scale and they want to validate and test it in Denmark, but then they're like going to other markets, right, and seeking partnerships with other financial institutions, or even what we see more of is actually you seek your scale outside of the financial industry, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's an interesting trend also.
So I would like you to give you a couple of more the opportunity to give us a couple of more pills of what will happen in the Nordics, because we're going to broadcast it before. So it's I'm going to be there, but I don't pretend to be one of them. But share a little bit what's happening before the last question for both of you.
Yeah, at the FinTech Festival. So we'll zoom in on some of these kind of strongholds of the Nordics where we see something special is happening. And I think that's especially within sustainability, ESG sustainability. The Nordic countries, and especially Denmark. Denmark is one of the world's most sustainable countries. I think that has a large spillover effect into financial technology also. And I can mention companies such as Matter that is doing ESG screening and has partnerships with Nasdaq, Singlife in Singapore, Fidelity, BNP, and so on and so forth. Agrina, this fintech that is working within agri-tech and fintech and incentivizing farmers to kind of change their production to being regenerative. And if you look at Sweden, you have excellent examples of normative to economy, DSTA, and so on and so forth. So sustainability, ESG, I think especially, and I think Ken can double click on that also in terms of Lunar, bringing banking to the SMEs in a way that they actually understand and is inclusive and transparent. And I think the whole area of SME fintech or fintech targeted SMEs, we really see the Nordics something interesting, partly also because of the infrastructure, the open public data, and so on and so forth. You mentioned yourself, the Nordics are pretty wealthy countries. we see a lot of different perspectives and takes on how to manage wealth from the advisory side, and also into areas such as crypto and tokenization of alternative assets. And then, of course, different technologies helping the incumbents to reinvent themselves, right? But that's some of the areas. So we have tons of events around investments. We have events targeted sustainability. We even have a running event, Matteo. So like Thursday morning, 7:15, we even take the fintech community running with the running coach from Lunar. He's offered to take us for a spin in Copenhagen.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm going to sign up for it. I mean, it's next time, if you want, I can do a beach volley training.
We should do that.
Exactly, totally. Okay, one last. It's not really a question. It's something that I think Copenhagen, especially, deserves it. I still remember vividly the cybers that we ran there back at the Swift time. So I don't know the ranking, but I want to say top 5 for sure. I think top 1 is Vienna, but Copenhagen, has as the ranking of the most likable city to live for many years. And even if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter. There are so many cities. I think is something worth to mention. So, and my question or topic I want to briefly both of you talk about is the importance of corporate well-being, and like the balance between personal and professional life, which is especially for entrepreneurs. Ken, I'm looking at you, with in your case very large families, for example, is something that is not easy to balance, right? And I wonder, how important. I know it is super important. So how important is a rhetorical question, but I agree with me or not that this is a topic that has been neglected for so many years. Everywhere but in the Nordics, because you guys seems to have found this sacred grail of the perfect balance, way before the others. You see what I mean? So everyone else is now talking about it. You guys have been doing it for so many years. That's my impression from outside. What do you guys think? Ken?
Yeah, I agree. I think not only is Copenhagen one of the best cities to live in, but not only Denmark, but maybe all the Nordic countries are always top 5 of being the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination. It's a combination of company culture, of how we were, how we grew up, having our first job all together at businesses that was already thinking about that balance years ago. We also have an amazing public system for education, for daycare, and so on. So I think we have we have a really great foundation for balancing your life of, working in a startup or in a scale up, and then still being able to raise a family. So Matteo, maybe I would encourage all your listeners on the pod to come to Copenhagen and get a job in the fintech sector, because there is a lot of opportunities up here.
Thomas.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think...
Even if you're working 24/7 for the past 2 weeks, but that's the exception, right?
Rest of the years, party on. No. No, it's... I think especially it's interesting to see, because we in our lab here in Copenhagen, we have around 40 companies sitting. And I think around 50-60% of the residents here in the lab are non-Danes, non-Nordic actually, right? And I think a lot of that comes back to actually students coming to the Nordics and to Copenhagen to study, finding a job in a fintech startup, and then settling down and figuring out that the quality of life, the work-life balance, even though we have cold winters, unfortunately not that cold anymore, right, because of global warming, but so a little bit more gray and dull now, but the quality of life is still excellent. It just take my team, a small team of 20 people, more than half is non-Danish speaking, and from all corners of the world. Singapore, Australia, Italy, Czech Republic, and so on and so forth. So it is a very international atmosphere where I think also many international talents immediately feel at home. And as we talked about before we began, I'm 51 years old. I remember when you walked around in Copenhagen 20, 30 years ago, and you heard Danish, right? Now I walk around Copenhagen, still live here. And all I hear is English, and that's, people are just all natural in speaking English also, which I think is actually, it's a small thing, but it actually matters. So it's a very inclusive environment.
Great, guys. Our time is up. Thank you so much for having shed the light on the Danish ecosystem. Looking forward to come back in a couple of weeks and certainly have a coffee or a drink with both of you. Thank you very much for being with us, Thomas and Ken. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Matteo.
Absolutely. Looking forward for the event in a couple of weeks, and it's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.